All right, welcome to Stand Up Memories, and I am Peter Bales. This is Jackie, the joke man Martling, letting me go.
I usually interrupt him.
He usually interrupts me, but he's having manners for a change. What a guest we have for this episode of our podcast. This guest, ladies and gentlemen, Joey Bishop.
You're very kind. I really appreciate it. I want to thank you both very much. And Jackie, you interrupt them all you want.
This is as close as you're going to get to the great Joey Bishop anywhere today. Our guest is, of course, Sandy Hackett, who is an entertainer, a comedian, a producer, a booker, a raconteur, who plays Joey Bishop and probably knows more about Joey Bishop than anybody left alive. And well, thank you for coming, Sandy, in person to our Tied In Media studio here in...
My pleasure to drive 40 hours out of Manhattan to get to Long Island with the traffic and the exits.
But you didn't know you were going to be in the heart of the chocolate works.
I had no idea.
So thank you for coming. And of course, Sandy Hackett's bloodlines are unquestioned. The son of the... I don't even have the words for Buddy Hackett.
You know, the words genius and legendary get thrown around so much that it almost has taken all the fight out of them. But, you know.
It's fair.
Buddy Hackett was one of the greats and spawned from that Dangerfield and Lenny Bruce and all those characters. You know, it's just fantastic. It's fantastic.
Thank you. I concur. I think he was one of the best ever, and yet when we started, there were so many young guys, and I felt like I knew everybody. And nowadays, I see.
Yeah.
I look at who's playing where, and I'm like looking for a name that I even recognize. Forget know them.
Don't even know what they were on or what they might have done, but somehow they're out there doing stuff. So good for them.
And you had a unique opportunity as a comedian to open for your father and not only work with him, but do what a lot of sons never do, which is become his best friend. That was in your bio, and I really noted that, probably out of jealousy. You were not only working with your father and close to your father, but his best friend. Is that fair?
Yeah. I mean, it was, I toured with him for 10 years, and at that point he had kind of wound down in his career, so we did maybe somewhere between maybe 30 to 50 shows a year.
Which is still a healthy amount.
Which is a healthy amount, but it wasn't like the old days when he used to work in Las Vegas and he'd work 30 weeks a year, 2 shows a night.
Yeah.
Plus go out on tour, and he toured this country with Anthony Newley, toured with Eddie Fisher. He did Broadway several times, a lot of films and stuff like that. But yeah, and I remember I was going out to work with him one time, and I said, some friends said, where are you going? I said, oh, I'm going out to work with my dad. And they said, wow, boy, I'd love to do that. I said, what do you mean? They said, you know, we're open for Buddy Hackett. That would be what a feather in my cap would be. I would love to do that. And I was on stage, and Jackie probably knows, and maybe you do. My dad, if you were working with him, whoever you were, because he had a lot of people over the years that worked for him, he would walk out on you in the middle of your show. Not always fully dressed, sometimes in his underwear, sometimes in his shirt, in his bathrobe, just a towel, whatever he did. And then he'd start talking to you, and it would become part of the show. And the best thing he said to me, he said, no matter what I ask you, you tell me what we both know to be the truth. So as I became the straight man, and I didn't have to try to create something, he said, just tell me what we both know, because he was going somewhere.
So there's no pressure on you to create.
No, and it looked like I was driving the bus, but I wasn't. He was driving the bus and telling the jokes. So, you know, you say, what'd you do for lunch today? Oh, well, Dad, you and I were together. We went for Chinese food. Yeah, and then he'd launch into, it would set him off into something. But I said to him when he came out, and I said, you know, I just want to say to you, I am so honored to be able to open for you and work with you, and so many other entertainers would have loved this opportunity. And my father said, fuck them, let them find their own famous father.
That is...
And you can hear that.
That is a classic. And he passed on down to you a love of show business.
And I do a show about my father called My Buddy, and I don't know how much you read, but I
Yep.
will be in Hackettstown, New Jersey. Amazing to me that I'm in Hackettstown, New Jersey in November 14th through 17th.
But there's no relation to the name of that town, or is there?
I might own it and have no idea. No, there is no relation, but it was just odd at the Centenary College in their Fringe Festival doing My Buddy, which is it's really a father-son story about.
So it's a one-man show?
It's a one-man show.
That's great.
That's great.
I didn't know that.
Written, co-written by my wife, who's an incredible artist, and directed by her, produced and directed by her.
And what a title, and what an opportunity. It's called My Buddy.
My Buddy.
Well,
Do you know, I bet
Best
he
of luck,
spoke
I mean-
more with his father in any 1 week than either of us spoke to
yeah.
our parents.
That's why I said it was jealous. That's what I
Yeah.
meant when I said.
You
Right.
know,
Not for the showbiz, but for the
But
relationship.
but for the relationship,
It's so
exactly.
incredible.
my dad was not a good sleeper, and if I went home to visit, I'd get up, maybe 6:30 in the morning. I wasn't, and he would be already up and having his coffee, and we'd sit and talk for sometimes 2 or 3 hours early in the morning before anybody else got up, and just sit and talk about everything. He was great. He was very well read, very bright, very smart, very intuitive. Loved to do the crossword puzzles and stuff like that. But yeah, that's how you become friends, is talking.
When you and I met, scary long ago, in Las Vegas, you get to the point where, was it 10, was it 20, was it 30, whatever. But one of the things that stood out the most was you told me that, I don't know whether out of boredom or for whatever reason, your mother decided to take cooking classes. And she was taking cooking classes, and then at the end of the week, she'd have to make whatever they had studied that week. And Buddy would have all the gang over, and your mom would cook for them. I just can't imagine. You're probably 10 years old at that time?
No,
give or
no,
take?
no. I'm much older, and you've got part of the story. Time
Right.
changes
Well,
the story. But
But am I in the ballpark?
you're in the ballpark. But my mom was. We were in. My dad. I grew up in Beverly Hills, and my mom was. I had moved out when I was 18 and went to Las Vegas to go to UNLV and study hotel management and work in the hotel business. But it was great because my dad came up and worked there at the hotel, so I got to see him all the time. So my mom, now I'm in my mid-20s, and my mother's looking to do something, so she goes to Malmaison Cooking School in Beverly Hills. A new restaurant had opened, the chef was there, and he was teaching the women of Beverly Hills how to cook. So she went for, I think, a year and a half, and my father said, "You're going to cooking school, you didn't cook nothing yet." And she said, "Why don't you invite all your comedian friends over, and I'll make lunch for everybody?" And she did. And he invited everybody, and we sat there, and those luncheons went on for about 3 years. About every 6, 8, 9 months, we'd have one, and the first one was attended, and I brought you a picture. You'll maybe put it in later, but everybody was there, and George Burns.
That picture you showed us
That's what
is
that's
one
from.
of those. Wow.
That's from the very first one.
Okay,
And
we're dropping that picture in now, right into the podcast. And boy, everybody is everybody in that picture, and you grew up with them.
When you told me that story, I pictured your family and 4 famous people. Like, I remember you mentioned like Pat Paulson or Red Buttons or whoever, and I just pictured, I couldn't imagine that table, that picture. Holy Christmas, my God, I could just imagine trying to get in a word edgewise,
it was actually very orderly, and my dad sat at one end, and George Burns was next to him, who was very feeble at that point. And George told great stories, and he loved to smoke a cigar, but my dad doesn't smoke, and there was no smoking in the house, so he just bought it and used it as a prop. And then he would go around the table, and he'd say, "Jackie, Sherry made a very nice lunch. You've been here for several hours. You haven't said a word. I think you owe something to the table." And George would set up everybody and call you out. And, Red Buttons, who I love, never had a dinner. Red's sitting there, and George goes, "Red, when are you going to say something?" And Red goes, I hardly have anything prepared, but I am doing a show in a couple weeks, and I brought just a couple of notes. Maybe I could do them for you. reaches into his pocket like every great comic and takes out a stack of cards this thick and starts doing the jokes. And now you've got, 30 of the greatest comedians of all time sitting around a table helping Red write to his and commenting on what he's doing. It was so much fun. I think we sat there for 4 or 5 hours, and then afterwards my mother said, I want to go outside and take a picture with everybody. And she did. And that's what that picture was from, outside in front of my folks' house in Beverly Hills. And I was in my 20s. I never spoke, and George didn't come after me to speak. I just sat and listened.
But since that day, especially in the era now where everybody walking down the street has a camera, what would you give to have one of those dinners on videotape? I mean...
And my mother wanted to audio tape it, and my dad wouldn't let her. He said,
it'll kill the movie.
Well, it just wasn't even a matter of taping it. It was just audio. You could put a recorder on. Nowadays you could just stick your iPhone on the thing and listen to it. But,
right, but
those days you had to put a little effort into recording it.
Hang microphones and wires. And
he didn't want it, and he said, what's said here is said here. Now, the sad thing is there were probably about 6 or 7 of those luncheons over the years, and little by little, one less guy, one less guy, one less guy, one less guy.
So they weren't all guys. The first thing that I noticed in that picture was a very attractive woman sitting right in the center. And I looked and I looked and I go, oh my God, that's Phyllis Diller. She was actually an attractive woman who worked so hard in her act not to be.
She worked very hard to be attractive.
And who's next to her who's still attractive? Angie Dickinson.
Is that who? I see
that
my
was
eyes
Angie
on that. Wow,
Dickinson.
that's a great picture.
Or it could have been one of Trump's wives. I'm not sure.
There you go.
Mix them and match them. Yeah, she still looks good.
Yeah.
So
And Don Knotts is up in the corner looking almost normal.
Don Knotts, Don Rickles, Bob Newhart,
Bob
Tom Poston.
I mean, all those guys.
Danny Thomas.
Sid Caesar, right?
Sid Caesar.
Sid Caesar was
Dom
there.
DeLuise.
Remarkable.
And I know you guys have been with a zillion comics over the years, but that day to sit around and laugh with those guys.
To be in a room with any 2 or 3 of those guys. I remember going back to the Friars Club. Actually, the first time Freddie Roman, who was the dean of the Friars Club, most people wouldn't know his name, but he was my sponsor. And he was going to sponsor me to be a friar, but first he took me to a roast and got me a seat and blah, 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 and had me back to the Friars Club. And everybody just sat around, but there weren't that many guys. There was like 15 guys, but I sat next to your father, and I thought I had been crowned. Like, he didn't say, Jackie, sit here. He didn't know me, but I'm sitting there. And I just remember you feel like you'd stepped into that strata, just being in the presence. You know what I mean?
My dad loved comedians. He loved the young comics. He used to invite guys over all the time. If they reached out to him, he'd have them over the house. He would talk comedy with stuff. Well, my dad, early in his career, and I was in my, when you say young, I was under 10 when my dad was in a show on Broadway, and Richard Pryor went to see him and came backstage afterwards and started a question, and he invited him to come to the house, and he stayed at our house for 2 weeks. And my dad used to say, I opened up Richie's head and told him a lot of good stuff, and I think I helped him.
Jeez.
Nice.
So,
Nice.
And there's a lot of people he helped, and and I'm always amazed when I see these lists of comedians and stuff like that, and people want to, somehow my dad gets left off sometimes by the newer guys that don't know who he is. He's gone 20 years now, but the older guys go.
He's always.
But they still should, comics are such odd ducks. Jackie Mason was a very unliked man, and he earned every bit of it. But he was maybe the funniest guy in the world, and I knew Rodney for a little while, and he would get so pissed off because he said, every time I see Jackie Mason, he says, oh yeah, oh no, Jackie Mason said about Rodney, fucking Rodney, every time I see him, he tells me you're the funniest, there's never been anybody funnier, I can't believe how funny you are, and he says, he has never mentioned me in any interview when he started getting bigger and everything. It's weird how much some people share and some people don't share, or for whatever reason, it's very odd.
You saw your father angry, if you've spent that so much time. I mean, What about comedy got under his skin? The travel? Were there any comedians that he didn't get along with, or was he really somebody who got along with pretty much everybody? He liked the new guys, right?
He liked a lot of the new guys, and there's a couple that are still around that I don't want to, cast dispersions on. But he was very creative, and he he loved the Three Stooges, and he was even offered to be a replacement Three Stooge, but
I think I knew that. Wow.
But he didn't like he was not silly. He was not a silly person. He was a storyteller like you, jokes. But he would start with one joke, and then and while you're talking, he's telling you, where are you from? You're Long Island, and that starts something. And then he notices you're with the glasses, and then and in the nightclub. And I've never seen any other performer do this. He'd have 8, 9, 10, 12, 15, 20 different stories going at the same time in the nightclub in the old days in Las Vegas, and somehow come back to knit them
Circle
all
back
together
and
finish every one. And then he used to do it on the Tonight Show in little 6-minute segments. He would start with Johnny. Johnny said, what are you doing? He said, well, I got a couple stories for you about an elephant. Oh, before I tell you that one, and then he would just keep going.
The one time I witnessed something like that, I got to be friends with a guy named Frankie Ray Perilli, who was friends with, Buddy and Lenny and Rodney and all those guys in Shecky. Like I know him, Shecky, I did, but not very well, Shecky Green. And he said, you gotta meet my friend Will Jordan. He's so great, blah, blah, blah. And because Will Jordan lived in Manhattan. I didn't know at the time, but he's a very wealthy family, but he lived above a delicatessen, And he finally came out with his book, and in his book there was like, Ed Sullivan came out with an autobiography. And he said, you got to see it because I finally got my page in Ed Sullivan, And it starts talking about Will Jordan. And I was, number one, couldn't believe that Ed Sullivan's autobiography was interesting. But I said, you know what, this guy's right there. So me and another guy took Will Jordan to lunch at the Friars. And he was fairly old, but he was still working. He worked being General Patton. He would do motivational speeches for businesses, dressed as, he was a nut. But he did the same thing. He sat at the Friars table with me and my friend David Friedman. He ordered like shrimp cocktail. That was it. He ate 2 shrimp. Most of it wound up on his front. But he must have started 10 stories. And you're like, but he went back. It's some kind of talent to go back and, dot the I and cross the T. And it was kind of fascinating. I would have loved to seen your father do that. It must have been just amazing to watch.
Yeah. Oh, right.
And you guys have both mentioned Lenny Bruce. And I'm amazed because a lot of young comics today have some sort of reverence for Lenny. And my dad and Lenny were friends. And one day I was at my folks' house going through some old tapes. And I find this tape and it says the Patrice Munsell Show from 1958, I think it was. And I go, well, what is this? Why would my dad have this? A videotape, VHS, that's how far back we're going. And I pop it in, and it's at the Patrice Munsell Show with special guests, the singer, the big tenor at the time, trying to remember his name, and the Not Ready for Prime Time Players. And who were they? My dad and Lenny Bruce. And they were the 2 comics in all the sketches.
Oh, wow, that's...
And my dad and Lenny were friends, and my dad used to say he and Lenny had an apartment together in Brooklyn when they had no money. They shared an apartment, not even a 1-bedroom, a studio with a bathroom, and they couldn't afford furniture, so they brought bags of sand up and poured it all over the floor and got a couple of beach chairs and put a light up in the corner, and they would say to girls, want to go to the beach with us?
It's genius.
But, to a lot of the young comics out there, for comics watching this, and Lenny was who he was in his day, but he never turned into what people want to make him out to be. I think if you listen to Lenny's old stuff, I go, he was okay, but people, well, he broke back. No, my dad broke barriers.
The legend is more than the actuality, way more.
And he took a lot of hits, and I understand exactly what you're saying. I really do. But Lenny Bruce is Lenny Bruce, and he was doing.
But when people say, well, Lenny did this, and I said, my dad was the first one to say ass.
Yeah.
My dad was saying ass before anybody. My dad said, And someone asked him in an interview one time, why do you started to go blue? In those days, you used to go blue.
Right.
You know, why are you going blue? He says, because people keep stealing my shit, and I'm going to do stuff no one will take.
That's a great
And then
answer.
he used to start talking about ass, but the way my dad would coin it, he says, ass is not a bad word. Ass, A period, S period, S period. It's just an acronym. Anterior, superior, spine. Ass never hurt anybody.
That's great.
You know what a bad word is? Hand. Hand is a bad word. Why? Because a hand could hold a gun. He said, a guy comes into a filling station, 4 o'clock in the morning, got a gun in his hand, said, it's a stick up. You go, all right. Same guy comes into a filling station, 4 o'clock in the morning with a gun in his ass. You're not really afraid.
Oh, that's
fun.
so great.
And that's how he got around saying things, but even in those days, he couldn't say ass, but he was saying ass in the nightclub in the early 60s.
Good for him. He was breaking barriers.
Yes.
He was breaking barriers.
There's a story that I've never wanted to run into you and ask because I'm so afraid it's not true.
But I'll tell you.
I have no idea if it was you, but it had to be you. And I was sure you told it, but you know, after 2 weeks, you know where a story winds up, let alone 20 years. But don't stop me. Let me just tell you that the story that I remember was, it was your bar mitzvah, and who's who in Hollywood, in the comedy community, was there, and Milton Berle said, follow me, and took you into the men's room and said, close your eyes and put out your hand, and you thought he was going to give you like $500 or $1,000, and he put his gargantuan penis in your hand. Does that have any semblance to truth?
Nothing.
Not even a little bit.
No, but I know great Milton Berle stories.
But have you heard that story about
Never.
someone else?
No, never heard it before about anybody that Milton never did that to anybody.
But I'm not smart enough to
Well,
concoct that story. Not to
mean,
make a bad
I heard
point.
that Donald Trump did that to Gene Carroll, but I didn't hear that about Milton Berle.
I think you've started a rumor, Jackie.
No,
that is-
Gene Carroll never had a bar mitzvah.
Okay, we've confused
Well,
the
you
issue.
know what? It is a great story, and I'm gonna.
He's gonna-
One of you comics out there that's watching this has got to know somebody that at least tells that lie, you know. And it's.
And we have a lot
So
of.
let's not interrupt. our
Well,
friend.
we have a lot of young comics that watch this podcast and Google. This podcast is made for Googling. You've already mentioned Anthony
Holy
Newley.
Christ! It was your bar mitzvah.
It was my bar mitzvah. Ironically, it was in an Episcopal church. It was very, very reformed.
Don't wreck the story.
Well, that was just because you got a discount there for the bar mitzvah.
But, Google Anthony Newley. Google Eddie Fisher. Remember and give him his chops. Buddy Hackett. And I'm going to segue now into something that you do.
He was in the middle of a story, and I cut him off.
No.
No.
What story?
He,
He's going to tell a Milton Berle story.
we can have a Milton Berle story, but I also want him to talk about a show that he's been doing that is super successful, and he still does it, about the Rat Pack. And, well, Jackie, look at him and guess who in the Rat Pack Sandy Hackett would play.
Sammy Davis.
Of course, the Jewish guy in the show.
When you walked in, I said to myself, well, I see it immediately, Joey Bishop.
But I heard somebody just went to see you at the Paramount the other night. I didn't even know you were in town. Is that a traveling show? Did you come here to do a few nights? Or?
No, we were at a few nights ago. We were at the Eisenhower Park, outdoors.
Oh, the outdoor thing.
At the Harry Chapin Theater, Harry Chapin Lakeside Theater outside. That's our second time there. It was great. The people are just unbelievable. That park fills up with people, and you go, wow, this is fun.
And you become Joey Bishop.
Son of a gun, yes, I do.
But it's the same four guys. They all get together here. You don't pick up guys, local actors or something.
I've done over the years. I've been doing the show a long time, so I've had to pick up. We've had, a plane didn't get in. A guy got sick. We've had everything happen, and have to teach a guy a show in a few hours, or find a guy who can, do Dean, or But I have guys that I've worked with a lot. In this last show, I had all the guys that.
But you knew Joey Bishop.
I knew Joey Bishop, and you know what? I never get to tell great Joey Bishop stories. So can I tell?
Yes.
My dad and he were golfing one time, and they're playing in the Catskills up in the Concord, and Joey's probably about the 16th hole, and he takes a mighty swing and throws out his back. And he can't even, literally, cannot stand up. Somehow my dad gets him into the cart. They quit golf, they go to the front. My dad had a 1963 Corvette, and Joey couldn't get in the car to go back to the hotel. So my dad took him and laid him over the hood. And drove back to the hotel. When he pulled up to the front of the hotel, a crowd of people gathered around, and someone said, "What happened?" My father said, "A deer shot him."
Now that's
story.
a great
What's
story.
the name of the show? It's called
Sandy Hackett's Rat Pack Show. I produce it with my wife, Lisa Dawn Miller, whose father, she's an incredible singer. She's in the show. She portrays a character we created called Frank's One Love, based on the relationship of Frank Sinatra and Ava Gardner. And her father was one of America's great songwriters, Ron Miller, who wrote Touch Me in the Morning, If I Could, Yester Me, Yesterday, Someday at Christmas, Heaven Help Us All, and For Once in My Life, which will be the new Lady Gaga movie for the Joker.
Oh, wow. So how is
And she's
it?
going to be, I don't know when this airs, but people may have seen, she's going to be at 54 below tomorrow night, and she's just got an amazing voice.
Oh, how is it working with your wife? Does that put more pressure on a marriage? Or some people are just flawless working together.
It's both.
It's all right.
Yeah. It has everything. My wife is amazingly talented and one of the best singers I've ever heard. She's also super smart, much smarter than I am. She does all the media, does all the marketing, does all the advertising. She helped me write my Buddy. When my father died and I was almost catatonic, having lost him, I couldn't put together, and my mother said, "I want you to run the funeral and do the eulogy." And my wife helped me put it together, and we took that and expanded into the show of My Buddy. And she said, "It can't just be a stand-up show. We're going to put music to it." We grabbed a couple songs of her father's. My dad had written a couple songs we put into the show, and it's really a father-son story. It's not a all Buddy Hackett kind of story.
Nice.
But it's a lot of fun. But
Nice.
here's Joey because of the Rat Pack. So I go to visit Joey and interview him when he was still alive, when I was putting the show together. And Joey...
He was still alive when you were putting together the Rat Pack
first time
show?
I put the Rat Pack together show. And so I went to interview him and talked to him. He goes, "I don't remember hardly anything. It's ridiculous. It's 50 years ago. What do I don't remember who did what." But he used to write all the stuff, and then everybody would steal from him, so he had to write new stuff. He says, one night, he says, on one stage, he says, "and the place is packed, you can't get in." And in those days, not only did the Rat Pack sell out the showroom, they sold out the hotel, they sold out the town. It was such an event because they were filming Ocean's 11 with Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis, Dean Martin,
Peter
Joey
Lawford.
Bishop, and Peter
And
Lawford.
people are thinking they might get a glimpse of them at the
And
tables.
everybody who was anybody came to town to see them, including JFK and Marilyn Monroe. So
Right.
Joey's on stage one night, the place is packed, and you can't get in to see him. He's doing the monologue, and here comes, he sees the maitre d' coming through the light and the smoke, the old days in the 60s, the spotlight and the smoke's going up, and he's got a chair over his head, and he goes, "What the hell is going on?" And all of a sudden, the audience starts to pay attention. He somehow moves people, and he puts a chair down. And the next thing, here comes Marilyn Monroe, walking from the back of the room. You know, it's like the place is just breathless. And just as she's about to sit down, Joey looks at her and says, "I told you, stay in the car."
Oh, you gotta love that.
I love it. Now,
gotta
accuse me of being corny, but sometimes corny is true. And I imagine your father looking down from heaven being very proud of you. Does that resonate with you at all, do you think? He obviously passed the torch to you and you're carrying it.
You know, and thank you very much, but the nice thing about being best friends with him and spending as much time on the road with him and talking to him is that he said all that to me when I was alive.
Ah, nice.
So there was never, gee, someone has to tell me that my dad, he would be proud of me. He said to me, I just want you to know how proud I am of you.
That may be the most, besides having a famous father and all his famous friends, that probably makes me the most jealous of anything.
That he said what you both needed to have said.
I know my
while
father
he
said
was-
that to me every night. Oh, wait, excuse me, never.
but the sense of humor in him, and I tell this show in My Buddy, is the first time I ever told him I was going to do, he got booked in Atlantic City. He was the second act to work there at resorts, and it was the only casino open. And he said, "I got booked in resorts. You want to come hang out for a few weeks?" I said, "Okay." So we go to resorts. The first day we go down out to the boardwalk. It is mobbed in the casino. He couldn't, hey, buddy. And they used to love to pinch him. He used to come up, pinch his face. He goes, I can't go out anymore. So I would go out and get him food. We'd send him room service or whatever. And about 2 weeks passed, and I said, I got to go. He goes, where are you going? I said, I got a job. What kind of job did you get? I said, I got a good job doing stand-up comedy. He goes, and the tears just started to come down his face. He goes, doing what? I said, stand-up comedy. He goes, really? I said, yeah. He says, what name are you going to use? I said, what? What name are you going to use? I said, Sandy. No, what last name are you going to use? I said, Hackett. Why? He goes, all these years I spent building up the name. I hate to see you fuck it up on one item.
I love that. I love that.
great.
But that was the love that he had, and amazingly, this is before cell phones and everything. I told him where I was going. I was going to Omaha, Nebraska. This is the hotel I'll be staying at. I fly. I get a cab to the hotel. I walk into the room. The phone is ringing. He goes, did you get there safe? I said, yeah. He goes, okay, here's some jokes for you for tonight. And he was always like that. And he said to me, and because your fathers weren't in and you guys had to develop all this stuff yourself, my dad said, learn every joke there is. You never know when you're going to have a way to, and you became the joke man, a way to twist it or turn it or reuse it.
It's going to fit in somehow.
It's going to fit in somehow, somewhere. So.
Sandy Hackett, you have been terrific. You promise us you'll come back sometime in person or Zoom. I don't care if you're in LA or wherever you are. You are wonderful. And because we're going to be true to our roots, and especially Jackie's roots.
Easy.
I want to hear, and so does Jackie, one of those we're going to close on a classic Milton Berle story because this is stand-up memories. And this
I think any Milton Berle story is a classic Milton Berle story. You know what I mean? So,
well, you had to have heard.
You have free reign.
This one. Milton's in the coffee shop in Las Vegas or something like that, and he's sitting with his manager. And a young artist comes over or something. Milton Berle, yes, I heard you have a great big dick. I'm having lunch. He goes, yeah, but mine's bigger. He goes, oh, okay. He goes, no, mine's bigger. Okay, can I eat my lunch? He goes, no, I'll bet you mine's bigger. Now the manager says, what do you want to bet? He says, $1,000, show me the 1,000. Guy takes out $1,000, puts it on the table. He says, all right, shows your dick. Takes out his dick, puts it on the table, and the manager says to Milton, just take out enough to beat him.
It's so classic.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Stand Up Memories.
You know, I didn't get to do the Betty White roast, but I wrote a bunch of jokes for it. And I said there was a time that Milton Berle, on a rainy day, took Betty White in an alley, and he took it out, and she said, Milton, it's too big. And he said, well, that's no reason to drop it in the mud.
And before we go, I just want to tell you, because Peter, this is the first time we've met. I looked you up. You're a wonderful comedian. But Jackie contacted me. It got to be, I'm going to say close to 40 years ago.
In Vegas.
Yeah, and you used to write me. And so I got to know who you were. And you were one of, besides my dad's group of comedians, you were the first guy that was kind of in my age group that reached out to me in some way. And I've always had a very warm spot in my heart for you. And I love when you came to Las Vegas and we got to play golf together.
It's been so long. I tell people, I'm pretty sure I played golf with Sandy Hackett. But I'm also telling that stupid Milton Berle story about his bar mitzvah, and I don't know if that's true, and it probably isn't. So maybe I made up the golf, but it was great. And it was great getting to know you. It has been, you know.
This podcast can really have wonderful moments like we're having now, and tell dick jokes. And I think that's why we're so successful. Sandy Hackett, you are terrific. Let's do it again. Jackie.
A pleasure to both of you.
Do you have anything you want, like when you got any shows coming up in a month or 2 months?
I will be in Hackettstown, New Jersey at the Centenary College in their Fringe Festival doing My Buddy, which is a show, and I tell all kinds of great stories about my dad. and all of his friends and my relationship with him. And there's music. It's directed by my wife, Lisa Dawn Miller. And we'll be doing 4 shows out there, the November 14, 15, 16, and 17. And if you're near Hackettstown or anywhere else in New Jersey or even New York and you want to come see a terrific show, I hope you'll come see it.
That's perfect timing because this is probably going to air before that. So that's great. Thank you.
All right,
Thank
and
you.
thank
Thank
you.
you,
And
thank
to
you.
the young comedians out there, Google Joey Bishop. This guy was an incredible comedian. He comes alive in the person of Sandy Hackett in his Rat Pack show. Thank you, man. We'll do it again.
My pleasure.
Jackie Martling, I'm Peter Bales. See you next time on Stand Up Memories.